The kitchen light hummed overhead as Lena stirred her tea in slow, absent-minded circles. The spoon clinked against the mug, a soft, repetitive sound that filled the silence Jared left behind. Again. He'd messaged her hours ago. Late again, don't wait up, and that was that. No, miss you. No warmth, just cold words on a glowing screen. She set the spoon down and glanced toward the hallway. A laugh echoed faintly from the living room where Reese, Jared's younger half-brother, was watching some comedy show. He had moved in 2 weeks ago after breaking things off with his girlfriend, claiming he needed a reset, and Jared had offered their guest room without even asking her. Lena hadn't objected. Reese was polite,
Clean.
and strangely observant. It started with glances. The kind of glances that lingered a beat too long. When he entered a room, his eyes would catch hers and hold just long enough to stir something unspoken before he looked away with that half-smile of his. He didn't say anything inappropriate. He didn't touch her. But he didn't need to. He noticed her. Something Jared hadn't done in months, maybe years. She'd changed her hair, tried new perfume, even bought a new nightgown weeks ago. Nothing. Jared had once worshipped her. Now, he barely noticed if she was in the same room. But Reese noticed. Like earlier that afternoon when she bent down to grab laundry. She'd felt his gaze trail across her back, steady and slow. When she stood and looked back, he simply smirked, playful, unashamed. And she hadn't said a word. Now she stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, sipping her tea and watching Reese, half his face lit by the TV glow. His lean frame was stretched out on the couch, one arm draped lazily over the backrest. Shirtless. Again. That was becoming a habit. He turned his head and caught her looking. "You always make that sleepy tea?" he asked, voice casual but teasing. "You never offer me any." She rolled her eyes lightly. "Didn't think you'd want herbal." "I might," he replied, tilting his head slightly. "Depends who's offering." She felt the heat rise in her cheeks and forced a small laugh. "You want a cup or not?" He grinned.
Nah.
"I'm good." She lingered another moment longer than she should have, then turned and padded back to the kitchen, heart tapping uneven beats beneath her ribs. It was harmless. He was just being playful.
Right?
But the tension stayed with her. Even hours later, when the house was quiet again and the mug sat empty beside her on the coffee table. She hadn't meant to stay up, but sleep hadn't come easily lately. It wasn't just Jared's absence. It was the emptiness that had settled in their marriage like a layer of dust. Footsteps approached. She looked up just as Reese entered, his hair slightly tousled from sleep, a plain white tee clinging to his frame. "You're still up?" he asked softly, rubbing his eyes.
Couldn't sleep, she said.
"You?" "Same," he said. "TV too loud?" "No, it's fine." He walked over and sat beside her on the couch, not at the far end, but not quite touching. Close enough to feel his presence. Close enough that she was aware of the heat of his body beside hers. They sat in silence for a moment. The low flicker of a candle on the shelf danced in the corner of her eye. "You ever think about just disappearing for a while?" he asked suddenly. "Driving off with no destination. No phone. Just freedom." She blinked, surprised. "Sometimes," she admitted. "More often lately." He glanced at her. "I get it. This house, it feels kind of like a museum." She laughed quietly. "Cold and filled with things no one touches?" "Exactly." She looked down at her lap. "That's a little too accurate." Another pause. The space between them buzzed with something unspoken. He didn't look away. He watched her, and she let him. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "Just, Jared always described you as quiet. Distant. Cold, even." Her heart jolted. "Wow." "I didn't mean it as an insult," he said quickly. "Just saying he got it wrong. You've got warmth. Fire, even. Just buried under too much silence." Lena didn't reply.
She didn't need to.
She felt seen, and it made her ache. He stood up, slowly. "Anyway," he said, voice softer now. "Sleep well." She nodded but didn't move. Not until he was gone. Then she leaned back into the couch, exhaled, and closed her eyes. She hadn't touched him. He hadn't touched her. But something had shifted, and she wasn't sure she wanted to shift it back. The rain had started just after dinner, soft at first, then gradually heavier, turning into a steady drumming against the windows. Lena stood by the living room curtain, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. She always loved storms, but tonight, the sound only heightened the tension in her chest. Jared hadn't called. Not even a message this time. She didn't know if she was angry or just tired. Maybe both. Reese appeared behind her without a sound, holding a blanket over one shoulder and 2 glasses in his hands. Red or white, he asked. She turned to see the bottle of red wine and raised an eyebrow. Is this your idea of a peace offering? She asked with a faint smirk. He shrugged. Just trying to be a good house guest. And a better listener. The couch was still warm from earlier, when they'd sat for hours watching a thriller that neither of them really followed. She hadn't meant to stay so long. But he kept the conversation light. He made her laugh. He paid attention. And now, here they were again.
Together.
Alone. Candles flickering. Thunder rolling softly in the distance. He handed her a glass, then dropped onto the couch beside her. She pulled the blanket across her lap, acutely aware of how close his leg was to hers. He sipped his wine and leaned back, casual and comfortable. She mirrored him, though her muscles were anything but relaxed. You always seem tense, he said suddenly. She glanced at him. I wonder why. He smiled. Didn't mean to pry. Just you carry it in your shoulders. In your silence. She looked away. Sometimes silence is easier than saying what no one wants to hear. He didn't press. Instead, he shifted his weight, and his thigh brushed against hers. Not by accident. Lena didn't move. The warmth of his skin through the fabric sent a small shiver up her spine. She tried to focus on her glass, on the movie still playing in the background, on anything but the way her breath caught in her throat. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. You know, he doesn't deserve you, right? She stiffened. That's not your place. Maybe not, he said. But someone should say it. She looked at him sharply, but his expression was unreadable, serious, but calm. He wasn't trying to provoke. He wasn't even angry. Just honest. You have no idea what our marriage is like, she said. He turned toward her, eyes holding hers. You're right. But I know what I see. And I see a woman who's dying to be touched, held, seen, and a man who doesn't even look at her when he walks in the door. The words cut through her like glass. Because they weren't cruel. They were true. Still, she turned her face away. You should stop talking. I will, he said. Just say the word. But she didn't. The silence stretched again. This time, heavier. More electric. He shifted, reached for the remote, and leaned over her slightly. His body pressed near hers, arm grazing her chest, not in a clumsy way, in a deliberate way, but gentle. That's when she saw it. The way the fabric of his shorts clung to his thigh. The size of him beneath. The boldness. The confidence. And she bit her lip, hard, as her stomach turned with heat. He noticed. She knew he did. Because he didn't look away. He paused just a moment too long. Still no touch. Still no line crossed. But everything in the air screamed tension. She took a deep breath and stood abruptly, placing her glass on the table. I'm going to bed. Her voice shook barely, but enough for him to catch. He stayed seated, his eyes following her. Okay, he said softly. Good night, Lena. She didn't reply. She walked upstairs, shutting her door quietly behind her. But sleep wouldn't come. Not even close. She lay there, twisted in sheets, her mind spinning. It wasn't that she'd almost kissed him. It wasn't even that she had wanted to. What frightened her most was that she hadn't felt guilty. Not even for a second. The memory of his body near hers, the heat of his gaze, the way her name sounded different in his mouth, it all looped through her like a slow-burning fuse. A notification lit up her phone. Jared. Made it. Flight in morning. That was all. No miss you. No love you. Just a status update. like she was his secretary, not his wife. She didn't reply. Instead, she rolled over, stared into the dark, and remembered the way Reese had looked at her tonight. Like she was still someone worth craving. The morning after the storm was unusually quiet. Jared hadn't messaged again, and Lena didn't bother checking in. She made herself coffee, then stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the slow drip of cream swirling in her mug. Upstairs, she could hear Reese's footsteps moving. Then the sound of water running. Then silence. It felt like waiting for something. Or someone. She told herself to stop thinking about last night. But her body hadn't forgotten. Not the way her breath caught when he leaned in. Not the flicker of heat when his skin brushed hers. Not the way her name had sounded in his mouth. That name hadn't sounded that alive in years. She spent the rest of the day avoiding him. Cleaned the guest room. Did laundry. Rearranged the living room bookshelves. Anything that didn't involve sitting still long enough to think. But evening arrived, regardless. The rain returned in the late afternoon, heavier than the night before. Thunder cracked somewhere in the distance. She drew the blinds, lit candles again, and settled in with a book she couldn't concentrate on. Then, like a magnetic pull, she heard his footsteps again. Reese walked in slowly, a towel around his neck, damp curls falling into his eyes. He looked tired, but aware. His gaze landed on her and stayed there. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her voice caught. "Just restless." He sat beside her, closer this time. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, before the house sank into darkness. The storm had taken the power. Lena didn't move. The soft glow of a nearby candle lit half of her face. Reese reached over and picked up the lighter, igniting another candle on the coffee table. The flame shimmered between them like a line drawn in wax. Easy to melt, easy to cross.
He didn't speak.
Just watched her. And she didn't stop him. Reese reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered. She felt her skin hum beneath his touch. "Say stop," he whispered. "I'll go upstairs. I'll pretend nothing happened." Her lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. His hand moved to her waist. She could feel his breath against her neck. The room was silent except for the low thunder outside and the pounding in her chest. "Lena," he whispered again. "Tell me to stop." She looked up at him, her breath shallow, her body trembling. But still, she didn't say it. She couldn't. She wouldn't. Her hand reached for his shirt, fingers curling around the fabric. She didn't remember when she started leaning in, only that when their lips finally met, it didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like coming up for air. The kiss wasn't hungry at first. It was soft, curious. A question, not a command. But when she didn't pull away, he deepened it, hands tightening at her waist, mouth trailing heat across her jawline. Her body surged toward him, instinct overriding doubt. The warmth of his skin, the way he pulled her closer, the firmness of his body, it filled every hollow place Jared had left behind. She bit her lip again, hard this time, as he slid his hand lower, firmer. And still, she didn't stop him. There was no rush. No need for words. Only breath and pulse and skin. No one asked permission. Because permission had already been given. By the silence, by the tension, by every moment they hadn't said what they both knew. After, the storm faded into the background. She lay still, half curled beneath the blanket, the room still flickering with candlelight. Reese's shirt lay draped across the edge of the couch. He reached for her hand. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "You're not going to regret this?" She looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said quietly. "I should, but I don't." He didn't press further. He just stayed close. Neither of them moved. Across the room, her phone lit up on the table. A new message from Jared. Flight delayed. Be home tomorrow afternoon. Lena stared at the notification but didn't reach for it. For once, she didn't care. Not about the message. Not about tomorrow. Not even about what this made her. Because for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel forgotten. She didn't feel like a ghost moving through her own home. She felt alive. And she wasn't ready to let that go.